at 9 a.m.
All right, it is 6 o'clock and I made it on time, so we will get started. In accordance with South Carolina Code of Laws, 1985, Section 30-4-80-E, the following have been notified of the time, place, and agenda of this meeting. The Herald, the Charlotte Observer, CN2, and WRHI. If I could, please ask you all to join me for a moment of silence. Thank you. We'll now stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Our next item is approval of the agenda, but I believe we want to make a small amendment. I would suggest we add item 3.03, which would be an update from the National School Board Conference that Ms. Branning, Ms. Pratt attended. So if someone would like to make a motion for that amendment.
I'd like to make a motion that we amend the agenda to include and update item 3.03 regarding National Advocacy Conference.
Second.
All right, you have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so then the agenda will stand as amended. And with that, we have some cards for public participation. So I will call you up in the order that they were handed to me. The first one is Mary Durgenti. I got that right? And for all of you, if you'll come to the podium, you have 3 minutes to address the board, and all our eyes are on you.
Thank you, board. Thank you for your service.
Oh, will you please state your name and address for the record? I'm sorry, I forgot.
Yes, my name is Marie Giorgenti. I live at 3070 Ivy Mill Road. So I came to speak about a book called Bronx Masquerade. I find it to be highly dysfunctional, lots of bad grammar in it. There's gangster talk, racism. I just feel our great literature has been supplanted by culturally responsive material that would not otherwise be read, nor part of anyone's library. I think we should pick books that are good for us, that offer encouragement and strengthen our broken culture. Some of these books, I believe, pervert our soul. We are so busy being culturally correct that we are forgetting our Judeo-Christian values, and I believe it's very disrespectful. There's another book, House on Mango Street and Hush. I find it very distasteful, and I find Hush to be race baiting at its best. I found something online that I know they do in New York. I'd just like to read it to you. The culturally responsive teacher or leader will explore their own intersecting identities, access biases and perceptions, how to access tools to mitigate their own behavior, racism, sexism, homophobia, unearned privilege, and Eurocentrism. I don't think teachers do that here. And it's these things and some of these stories that I find this is the problem. I think this is propaganda and indoctrination. I brought the book with me. So my guy, he is not doing the Bronx Masquerade. He's doing Call of the Wild. And so he sits in the media room by himself, and that's what he's doing. But in this book, there's all units. There's a unit on immigration, and I thought I'd like to talk about that. There's a lot of complaints with the immigrants, but we don't have any immigrants that actually built this country like my grandparents. There's no stories on communism, socialism. They're, they, they talk about human rights, but I feel human rights are being disregarded. There also in this book, in another unit, there are no stories on veterans. There are no stories on World War I, World War II,
Ma'am, I'm sorry,
Vietnam.
your time is up. If you could please wrap it up.
Well, there's also horror. I don't know why we have to do that to our kids. And
Thank you.
basically, I'll just wrap it up by saying, reading is a gift we give to ourselves. And some of these books here are very egregious and would never be read by your child had it not be forced upon you. And I also want to say that,
Ma'am, I'm sorry, we're out of time.
Okay, thank you.
But I will say, we do have a process. If there are books in the school libraries that you are not comfortable with, there is
it's
a
not the
process.
library, it's the read.
There,
It's-
instructional materials in general, we do have a process that you may bring up concerns
Oh,
about
I
them.
did, and they were nice enough
Thank
to
you.
give me this book to look at. And if you just take a look at it,
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
thank you.
Our next speaker is Emily Clement. And if you'll do the same, please state your name and address, and then you may begin your time.
Emily Clement, 830 Linwood Farms Drive, Fort Mill. I've lived in Fort Mill since 2012. God has blessed me to be a mother of 2 children in the school district. The Oxford Dictionary definition of language arts is the study of grammar, composition, spelling, sometimes public speaking, typically taught as a single subject in school. The new language arts textbook that is being taught in the middle schools is far from this definition, and the parents of the school district should be very concerned. Parents put their trust in the school board, the administrators, and the teachers of Fort Mill schools to protect their children from evil, not encourage them to follow the darkness. This textbook is full of poems, short stories, and essays that have been banned by many libraries and public school systems due to sexuality, racism, violence, guns, and suicide, to name a few. Bronx Masquerade is one of them. It mentions AK-47s, to be specific. House of Mango Street is another one. It's been banned by North Carolina schools last year because school boards found it to be inappropriate due to sexual context and profane language. I'm praying that the school board does too. The list goes on, but for the sake of time, I'll stop with those. I voiced my concerns to Forest Creek teachers and administrators, and I'm still waiting on responses weeks later. I stand here hoping and praying that the school board hears my pleas and concerns for my kids. There are dangers in allowing them to read these books. Suicide rates have increased. There were 46 school shootings last year in this country this year so far, and it's only September. The frontal lobe of the brain is not fully developed in a human until their late 20s. It's responsible for decision-making, behavior, personality, and impulsivity. Why would we want to inundate our students with these topics and stories when their brains are not developed to handle it is beyond me. I don't know who's in charge of selecting these textbooks or why this school board and this school district would support this. But I pray that you choose to protect the minds and hearts of the children in this town. Fort Mill schools should be teaching students topics that encourage them to be a light in this world, not filling them with dark and evil. Please take action, protect our children, and have the school districts get back to teaching the definition of language arts. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have one last, Denise Casey. Same thing, if you'll
Hi.
give name and address.
Denise Casey, 1110 King Circle, apartment 107. I am standing before you today. Thank you for the time. To the school board, community, and educators, I'm standing before you today as a candidate for school board. And I just want to introduce myself and make myself known to the school board, and that I am partnering or would partner with the school board and educators and community to help to develop our children holistically. I am a nurse educator, and I am very passionate about educating our youth and the community. and I would like to partner with you as a member of the community going forward. And I thank you for the work that you have done and the work that you will continue to do on behalf of our students. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to working with you all.
Thank you. All right. In section 3, we've got a handful of staff reports. We'll start with procurement updates from Ms. Kelly Kinston.
Good evening. I am here to talk about one of my favorite subjects, procurement. Yay. We recently had our annual audit in July, and I will say it was one of the easiest, and if I can say pleasant, audits since I've been here. We received some positive feedback, and I will forward the final audit findings and report to you by the end of this week. But I just wanted to give you a quick update that we did have some suggestions for clarification to our procurement policies, which we'll be talking about at a later time this evening. But everything went well. We were very pleased with it. So I was very happy, and we just did make some minor changes to the procedures. Okay, thank you.
Oh, that was quick. Okay.
Yeah.
Questions for Ms. Kinston before she completely disappeared? All right. Then we have Mr. Young, who's going to talk about a first reading of district cell phone policy.
Good evening. I am here to present the first reading of policy JICJ, which is prohibition of personal electronic devices during the school day. As you probably know, this policy was developed in compliance with the General Appropriations Bill. It is proviso 1.103, applicable to kindergarten through 12th grade. And it basically says to receive state funds allocated for state aid to classrooms, the school district shall implement a policy adopted by the State Board of Education that prohibits access to personal electronic communication devices by students during the school day. For purposes of this provision, a personal electronic communication device is considered to be a device not authorized for classroom use by a student utilized to access the internet, Wi-Fi, or cellular telephone signals. So this does include anything that could, as I said, internet, can access the internet, Wi-Fi, cellular signals, capture images or videos. It includes, but is not limited to cell phones, smartwatches, tablets, and gaming devices. Also, for the purpose of this policy, the school day is defined as a period of time that a student is present on school campus from arrival, which is the tardy bell, until the afternoon dismissal at the end of the instructional day. There are a couple of exceptions. Students with IEP, medical plan, or 504 plans that state that they need a cell phone or cellular personal electronic device, or anyone who is a member of a firefighting or emergency organization and has permission from the superintendent or his designee. Any questions?
I'll share a little bit additional where getting this policy to the point that we have received it. I worked as the president of the South Carolina School Boards Association along with the Department of Education, Ellen Weaver's staff. I assembled some school board trustees from around the state to come and work with her staff to make this policy from kind of our perspective and implementation so that it was fully encompassing and answering of questions, because what they had originally sent didn't get the job done. So I personally am pleased with what they've sent out from their office, just by virtue of it was, I felt like, more full-on encompassing than where it started.
Question for you, Mr. Young.
Yes, sir.
So can you frame up to the community 30,000-foot view, how's it gone?
So just in conversations with our principals and just observing, I think it's gone very well, a lot better than we originally thought, because prior to this year, we did allow cell phones at the high school level during transitions and during lunch. So it is a big change for our students, but I think that we've seen a lot of positives from it. I think we've even had people claim that the lunchrooms are too loud now because students are actually talking to each other. So I think from a 30,000-foot view, I think it's gone very well considering. Now, we've had some violations. They've had to talk to students. I will say About 85% of the violations that have been entered into our discipline system, which is Educator's Handbook, have been warnings. So it's just, hey, you know, put that phone away. And we're working with our students. The administrators and teachers understand that this is a big change. So they're working with the students to really adapt to this change of not having that cellular device.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
So my question is focused around the part two, implementation and enforcement. And I don't know, this might be something to think about and coordinate with Dr. Maziar's when looking at this and support for the building level administration is what if you have students that would qualify to carry a personal device in B or C, but are chronically abusing the privilege of having that device not pertaining to their medical condition or their
Firefighting.
right, the fact that they're a firefighter. How are we going to address that? Do we have a policy that would, or a step level in the discipline that would address
Yeah,
it?
we don't have it. It is not in our matrix for those two groups, I guess you could say. But that is something we probably need to address. I don't know how many students we have that have this in an IEP or 504 or health plan.
If they're a type 1 diabetic.
Yeah, you're right. So I don't know that number, but I think that's something that we would have to meet with parents about and say, hey, you know, so-and-so has abused this privilege. We are going to provide consequences if they're not using it in the appropriate way. So I just use the matrix that we have.
Okay. Thank you.
Did you have a question?
Not a question. I was just going to clarify. You said it clear, but I want to make sure others
Yeah.
understand it. Is that, yeah, this is from bell to bell.
Correct.
It is not after school. So our extracurricular activities are not included into this.
Correct. And they did, if you read the policy, it does say you may include athletic events on the school bus, but we do not. As a district, we're allowed to decide that, and we are not banning cell phones during athletic events or on the school bus, unless they're abusing some type of making too loud noise, playing music too loud or something. The bus driver might address it that way, but they're not banning the cell phones. And I do want to point out, I don't know if I mentioned this, middle school was already doing this. They had their cell phones put up from bell to bell prior to this year. It's really just high school is the one that has to adapt.
Couple more things.
Yep.
Do we specifically address field trips anywhere?
So it does say in there that right now we have not allowed them on field trips. That is something we can discuss as a district. It does say in the state policy that we can allow them on field trips. And when I say we don't allow them, we allow them to take them. We just don't allow them to have them out. Correct.
And I think we also know that we have classes at the high school level that go out and take pictures and things like that. So there would be certain circumstances where it's a specific case by case. During this time, I'm going to ask you to use your phone.
Correct. So they can apply, they do have to apply in writing to Dr. Epps or his designee, and it has to be linked to a standard or objective for educational purposes, and then we can decide as a district whether to approve that or
Because
not.
I can think about on field trips, when they go to DC, when the 8th graders go to DC,
Yep.
they want to be able to take pictures.
Correct.
Obviously, we would want them to be able to.
And if this is approved, then we will come up with some way of doing that, a process of applying for that if we need to.
And both of those, and the abuse on the medical side, all of that was discussed. And because we felt like because it had the component to it of the superintendent being able to override and so on and so forth, when it came to a field trip, that could be the process that was handled for that.
Just one more. I think it's probably worth discussing for just a second. Our process, certainly at the high school, and I believe as well as at the middle school, if a student takes one to school, I mean, obviously, not every student will have a phone at school,
Correct.
but a large number or a large percentage will, and there were to be an emergency, those phones are not being confiscated or anything like that. They are available to the students in their backpack, so they should be, or in their
Correct.
locker, or so they should be able to have access to it in an emergency should they need to.
Correct. The only thing I've seen done and some or heard about teachers doing is sometimes teachers have something at the door where, hey, put your cell phone in this cubby or whatever, but they can access them if something were to happen. Yeah.
Other questions? All right, thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Young.
Yep.
And that now, Ms. Branning and Ms. Pratt, if there are things you would like to share with us about your visit to DC a couple weeks ago?
I'm gonna let the newbie go first.
It was eye-opening for me. That was the first time that I had put on my big girl pants and been brave and said, "Hey, let's talk about what it looks like in Fort Mill." It was fascinating to be with all the other states
Mhm.
and see how different and maybe like a little fairy tale we have going on here when you hear about the problems that they're facing, that we have problems and we are working for solutions, but the level and degree that they have is just greater. I had my eyes opened in what it's like to try and talk to our legislators and get them to listen. And we had 3 scheduled meetings, and 1 was a difficult meeting, and 2 were lovely and great. And I was surprised at who was ready to work with us, and I was pleased about that. And it was interesting to be with people from the state of Georgia so soon after they suffered a horrible tragedy. And it was interesting. One of the guest speakers said that, and I think we feel that as educators or people who love education, that when it happens to one state, it happens to every state, that we all put ourselves in those shoes. So, I mean, it was eye-opening. At one point, I told Michelle, I really don't understand. They're not going to listen. I don't know why we keep coming back. And then 2 hours later, one of them said, "I'm so glad you asked that question. What do you think about this as a solution?" And Michelle and I were like, "Whoa, you want to talk about a solution?" So it was up and down, but overall, I think good for me to learn from that way.
And having been to one a couple of years ago, it is that the funding processes, unions, not unions, the way school days are structured, all of that is so wide. Even size of districts, we you know, it's not uncommon at all to have 2,000-3,000 people in a district, and that's it. You know, in many states, whereas that's considered a really small district in South Carolina. So there's a lot of variation, but part of what you also said is not different, which whether it's at the state or at the federal level, trying to get our legislators to work with us for solutions is often a challenge.
Yep. So I'm going to just give a 5,000-foot view with regard to, we did have 2 really great meetings. We had one that was really disappointing, doesn't even begin to cover how I felt walking away from that meeting, because it really wasn't a meeting. It was a tirade against school districts and public education in the state of South Carolina, with some threats that came along with it. And I just felt like it was disappointing. It was disheartening, because it was over information that was only half truth and information. And no matter how much you let that legislator talk about what they believed and perceived to be going on, in particular in our district, they were so incredibly off base and wrong, but you couldn't even with true facts and true information get them to listen and understand. So it took a couple of hours of mental challenging to regroup from that. So I don't want anybody to ever think that going and advocating, whether it's in Columbia or in DC, is a picnic and a party, because I was ready to get myself back to the airport and just come home, because I had it at that point. And I didn't have that luxury. But the next 2 meetings that we had were good. One was a little bit of an adjust on the fly, which is typical when I've met with this legislator. And I guess I should preface this with, I have been doing this national advocating for 10 years. I think we may have missed one in person because of that C word that I don't let anybody say anymore. So I do this every year. And this is the first year that I have come away, and I'm going to call this one out by name, that I have come away from Senator Lindsey Graham's office and have had a smile on my face and a giddy up in my step that, oh my gosh, we've got a chance to make a difference where IDEA funding is concerned, but it's really not IDEA funding. It's about fixing that program that he said, and I quote, "We are never going to fund it at the level we promised 50 years ago, so let's blow it up. Let's pick the right pieces and the appropriate pieces, and let's put it back together and make something that works for everyone, and then that we can fund in addition to that." The other big ask that I had from the ones that we met with was, in having done this for 10 years, y'all have never funded IDEA to the level it was promised 50 years ago, which was 40%. I think the most we've ever seen has been close to 21%, but we're probably about 14-ish% right about now. And so I literally said to all of them, I'm not even going to ask you because it's not doing any good. We're going the wrong way. So instead, I want to talk about committing to funding for mental health providers, school psychologists, behavioral interventionists, and all the things that our kids need that we exposed and uncovered since that C word, because y'all, we have a mental health crisis in the United States of America. And if we are going to continue to be the leaders of the free world, we got to get this right, and it's not right now. So that was my ask and my big drop to them. And I can honestly say, like I said, this is the first time that I have come away from Lindsey Graham's office with a pep in my step, glad that I had that meeting, because the other side to that is, while I have been doing this, I've not made a meeting with his office every single year, but this is also the first year that he was actually there and attended. So it came out of his mouth, and I was pretty happy about that.
So it was good. I just thought of one other thing I'd made a note of I've forgotten who published it, on a national scale. I think South Carolina was 29th for best state for teachers and 27th in North Carolina, or maybe I have them backwards or something like that. And so, to your point on the national scale, I wish that was a whole lot higher. I think it's unfortunate. I mean, I think we have and will continue to do everything we can here to make Fort Mill, anyway, between pay increases where we can and working conditions, which hopefully go a little bit further than 27th or 29th if you were to compare us to the rest of the country. But yeah, could have been much better. Guess it could have been worse, but could have been better. Okay, we have 3 action items scheduled. The first one is to consider the approval of the changes for the procurement manual that we heard about just a second ago. So if you want to talk us through those a little bit more.
So per the State of South Carolina Procurement Code and the District Procurement Code, any changes that we make to the procurement manual has to be approved by the school board, which is why we're here tonight. One of the changes that we made was to clarify how we handle our recurring expenses such as utilities, taxes, items like that. We haven't changed the process. We've documented it in more detail than how we were. That was a suggestion by the auditors on question on how why we handle it a little bit different than we handle a standard purchase. So the revised policy was in your packet. I've highlighted the additions and changes in yellow. So that was one of the changes or clarifications. The other one is that was handed down from the state also last year, and we've been working through it, trying to have a good policy in place, and we've documented it with this change on how we handle grant funds. They've been very clear on how we handle that money and what types or how we make these purchases. So again, we clarified it, added it to our documentation and our policies. So those were the main changes for the actual procurement policy manual. Are there any questions?
I don't have
No questions? Are we okay with a single reading? Do we have to have 2? Are we actually approving it with a single reading?
Yeah, we've
Okay.
always done single readings.
I wanted to make sure we weren't breaking any policy. So I would entertain a motion to approve the changes to the procurement manual.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the recommendation of the administration for updates and definitions in the procurement manual as presented.
Second.
Motion is second to update the procurement manual as presented. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We have a new
Thank you.
manual.
And part of that also that's in your packet is the minority business plan. That also has to be approved by you every year. There has been no changes to it from last year. But again, as required by the code, I do need approval for that, which has also been included, and I ask for approval tonight as well.
Sure. I'd like to make a motion that we accept the recommendation of the administration to continue the approval of our minority procurement plan.
Second.
I just want to clarify.
Sure.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minority business
Business plan.
enterprise plan.
Yes,
That's
yes.
the official term. So, motion and a second for that. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that motion carries as well.
Great.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Mr. Romanek, who's going to talk about the District Energy Management Program again this weekend, or this week.
Hey, guys. Well, after a year, we're finally at the point, a couple weeks ago, the folks from Schneider Electric, who are here in the audience again, Justin and Ashley, we're at the point of looking at the contract, finalizing the contract. So in your packet, I provided you a memo and a couple items in there, including the contract, the value and draw schedule for payment, and an email from the attorney stating that he went through the contract and was in agreement after making some changes that Schneider agreed to. So tonight I want to recommend that contract, and it's a long number. So the district administration recommends that the board approves the recommendation to enter into an energy management contract for Phase 1 with Schneider Electric in the amount of $30,010,570.92, which will guarantee the district $22,481,880 in savings over the next 20 years, with a total projected savings of $25,226,122.
Cool.
Those are very specific numbers, so.
I'm almost like Leanne now. She loves that.
I'm looking forward to counting the extra 92 cents.
That's right. I want to see that each
92
month.
cents.
I have you. Any
I know
questions?
We had a long conversation about it,
folks
yes, last meeting.
Yeah.
I'll start with the motion, if I would entertain a motion.
I'd like to
I-
make,
Oh, no, I was
Motion
just gonna
first.
make a
Motion
quick
first.
comment.
motion first. Sorry, babe.
Yes, okay.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the recommendation of the administration to enter into the energy management contract with Schneider Electric with a cost factor of $30,010,570.92 that will have a savings of $22,481,880 for Phase 1.
Second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second to enter into a contract with,
Schneider.
I was trying to find the
Schneider
Schneider Electric in the amounts as stated by Ms. Branning. Is there any discussion, Mr. Bodie?
Yes, ma'am. Just a comment, I just wanted to say that I'm appreciative of the 2 or 3 iterations and presenting this to us. And I like the phased approach. And I just wanted to say I'm appreciative of the long-term thinking regarding this. So thank you.
I'd like to make a comment for clarification, because there's, if you look at the numbers here, there's a deficit in expense versus savings. But that is to the tune of what's not so evident in this is the newer, updated equipment that we will gain for that smaller amount of money.
Right.
We're spending a lot of money to put new stuff in, but we're saving a majority of that back. And then we have longevity of that equipment that has been put in place to save on energy.
Well, and some of those things that are being replaced, we're getting ready to be on the replacement schedule anyway.
Right.
So it's kind of a win-win all the way around. So I applaud that.
Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed?
Thank you.
That motion carries, and we're now in contract. I actually believe, oh, nope. Gosh, I can't skip this part. 4.03, we must discuss the approval, 25-26 calendar. That's right, sorry. And everybody's waiting to book their plane tickets as soon as they hear the dates.
I am quite sure of that. I am here tonight to present the district's recommendation for our 25-26 calendar to you. The calendar remains unchanged from what we saw at the last board meeting, so I'm happy to make this submission to you. We'd like it to be approved as submitted at this time.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the recommendation of the administration for the 25-26 academic school year calendar as presented.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the calendar as presented. Any discussion?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, got a few, maybe 3 or 4 questions, Mr. Burke. I won't hold
All
you
right.
up, but just, so, first question is, we had last year's calendar, or the calendar win today. Kind of paint a picture of how did we get here? 3
Sure.
years ago, we had a different calendar than we had last year, than we here.
Yeah, just to give you the kind of Cliff Notes version of it, going back, I want to say it was around 2019, 2020, there started to be questions about a small caveat in the law when it came to the start date. There's a caveat in the law that says you must start on the third Monday unless you are on a modified year-round calendar. Now, quite frankly, it's been in the law for a while, but nobody really knew what that meant. Nobody knew who controlled that. Nobody knew really what the stipulations were. So at that time, around 2019, 2020, I believe it was, the State Department actually issued 2 memos back-to-back in requests from districts about that and said that there's nothing in the state law that gives the State Department control over what is a modified calendar. So districts are free to research different types of modified calendars and create one if they choose to. So at that point, districts across the state started looking at these because, quite frankly, prior to that, most districts in the state, with exceptions of maybe the ones at the coast, have been wanting to start before the third Monday so that you could get 90 calendar days of school in before the winter break and get your exams done and start your next semester fresh when you came back. With the third Monday, that was almost always impossible. We were always shorting days, maybe 87s, 86s by some districts like us, but then there were other districts that refused to roll over and they were shortening to 83 days, that kind of thing. And some of them even got in a little bit of trouble because they had some missing days due to weather or other faculties, and they were in danger of not even having enough days to make a semester because you have to have at least 80 to consider it a semester. So that's where we were. Districts started creating these calendars and putting them moving forward. There are all kinds of models out there. They change every year. The calendar we have currently this year is a modified calendar that we presented last year. It does not include the breaks that are in there. We decided to try a calendar that started early but still finished early as we could just run through the school year with the traditional holidays that we had. We got a lot of feedback from that, and I actually think in the positive response to this calendar, we're now seeing that's what is the preferred situation. Not everybody loves it. I don't want to say that. We did hear some dissenting voices. But that's what led us to this calendar. We started looking at what we could do to get more breaks in. Originally, we were looking at adding a couple of days possibly to Thanksgiving or another holiday here and there. What we found was when you did that, you're still coming back the same week that we're coming back, just 2 days later. So we felt like this gave more benefit doing these solid weeks. If you're going to have to come back at that time anyway, you might as well take and go ahead and get the full advantage of the weeks, which everybody, again, according to my email box, is very happy with. There were concerns that I'll address that came up from this. Obviously, the shorter summer, although this will be a 10-week summer between the end of this school year and the start of next, that will probably drop down to about 9 weeks if we continue on this cycle. But we heard some issues with, obviously, with travel and, summer jobs and sports and that kind of things. But what we've seen from our other districts is that everybody gets into a flow on it. Honestly, there are multiple districts, including here in York County, that are operating on a very similar calendar this current school year. So we believe that the summer offers still plenty of time for that travel that we've heard, whether it's abroad or locally. And then obviously the weeks add some options for travel during the school year or just a break during the school year. So that's kind of a Cliff's Notes version of how we got here, but that's what everybody in the state is pretty much looking at now.
So when we're going through this exercise, how can you kind of share with the community how do we take into consideration our teachers, which I consider our engine of the district, if you will, and taking that into consideration, our students, staff, all of that. Could you?
Yeah, I'll be honest, when I look at building these calendars, because it is so much more open with the modifieds, I really have had the opportunity to look at what we hear from our teachers, what we hear from our parents, what we hear from our students, what we hear from, community members in general, obviously, because this goes far beyond just the people in the schools. This affects businesses and those kinds of things. So I'm able to actually look at that. And what I try to do when I'm creating these and when I take these to Dr. Epps and we talk about them in cabinet is to come up with something that gives something to everybody, not just caters to one group or another group or that kind of thing. We try to come up with a compromise that would cater to everyone as best we can. Again, you're never going to make a calendar that's going to make everybody happy. But so we do look at, we know that teachers, I talked about this last time, pretty much since, the COVID situation happened. We know that teachers included especially, are looking for more breaks. So that's something that's figured into this calendar. It was something figured into the calendar that we currently have, just in a different model. So we do try to think about everybody and try to come up with a compromise that we think that everybody will find something they like about it.
Okay, and last one. So there are positive outcomes out there surrounding year-round calendar. Mm-hmm. Have we ever considered that?
We have not. A couple of things there. The district has not looked at that. There is no mechanism in the law right now that would say you could easily switch to a year-round calendar. So there would be questions there. I don't know that our community has an appetite for that. To be honest with you, even the parents who like this realize they are having to sacrifice giving up something in the summertime, and they're comfortable with this, but I don't think they would be comfortable with additional time pulled from the summer. So I think this is where it's going to settle for us. And I would say that there's a lot of data out there too that say it depends on the type of schooling and the type of area you're in if the year-round model is truly going to be effective.
Thank you, Mr. Burke.
Yep.
Go ahead, you have a question?
Nope, no, I was just going to comment again. Thank you for your efforts on this. I want to thank everybody out there that took time to send us. I know we probably received, I think it was well over 30 emails since the last meeting that tended to all lean towards one way on the opinion of the calendar. But appreciate those folks, and I speak for everybody else on the board. I'm sure you sort of followed social media, the discussions that were happening about the calendar, as we often do as well. And I think for me, it paints a good perspective of, is there something that I'm missing that I'm seeing that would help with decision making? But I do think that you did a wonderful job with this calendar. At the end of the day, it's 180 days. We have to get it in every year, right? Yes. One way or another, and it won't make everybody happy. But I do appreciate your work and paying attention to what the feedback that the staff gave us. I do feel like overwhelmingly a lot of the staff that we heard from were supportive of this calendar, right? And we ultimately know that the best interest of their students is at the heart of that. So Thank you.
And I will say, you had posed the question last time. I did also want to address this, because one of the other concerns we heard about was the situation with sports and band and those types of programs. And, I've talked to our high schools, I've talked to other high schools about how they're dealing with this. And honestly, one of the responses that I got from multiples was, this is not something new to our sports programs. Our late winter sports programs have games and stuff through winter break. Our, spring and getting close to summer sports programs are playing constantly during spring break. So this is not something our schools are unused to dealing with. It may be something these specific programs are. But I've also heard that, coaches are looking at different options for maybe moving practices earlier in the day so kids still get the afternoon off, or, looking at different types of scheduling, maybe changing up some of the ways they do things. Band, I would assume, would be the same. So I think whatever happens, our high school is going to make their way to adapt to it. But I don't think you'll see a sweeping change across the state, to do this, because then you'd have to go back to the mandated calendars.
And they're they're all very different weeks.
Yes, they
right?
are.
So our week
And-
is not
and
the same
we've-
as somebody else's week.
We faced some of this before too, as Dr. Nepson and I were talking earlier today. We've played sports games, football games, before the school year has even started, in these week zeros and that kind of thing. So this is not a new trend. It's just something that is new for where it is placed at. And I think our schools will work with it. You know, it is unfortunate some of those parents may not be able to utilize the travel, but these are, you know, voluntary programs that students are in. So I think we'll work around it to make the best of it for all the kids involved.
Right. Well, and we've played Friday night football games when we haven't had school that day.
That's true.
You know, if there's a hope that our athletic directors could get together and that week of break, whatever, that becomes the bye week for football, cool. The same with whatever takes place in the winter, spring, if that becomes the bye week in that event, cool. As an international parent who has a kid overseas, I can sympathize and understand the families that go overseas to visit family and whatnot for the summer. It's still the same amount of school days. It's still the same amount of teacher contract days. It's just shuffling it a little bit, and the breaks that I think are so critical for not only staff but for kids, the way we've got those set up, I just think that that's the best overall compromise and direction that we can go to for everybody.
I'd like to expand on what you said about sports and making adjustments. There's also the concern, particularly with the younger kids, elementary and some into middle school, after school programs, daycares, that sort of thing. What are we going to do? Well, we already know that some are like our like a Flyers program.
Yes.
Is already making adjustments to
Yes.
support those weeks. I expect other entities, daycares, whatnot, will also make adjustments, just like we're making adjustments on the athletic side.
Yeah, I would assume the same thing. I mean, like I said, we've heard that from Springs. I would assume some of the private businesses are going to look at these as opportunity weeks to provide camps or other things that maybe they have not been able to traditionally do during these types of or these periods of the year. So I would assume that any entrepreneurial, skills are going to be out there in effect to try to find ways to offer, options to students.
Voids will be filled.
Yes.
And,
yes.
and or high school kids are gonna get a week-long babysitting gig, so.
That too. Also, a few years back, we went to trying to do 2-year calendars. And I think
Yes.
the first year was considered solid done, whereas the second year, here's our plan, may get tweaked if we have to.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this past year, we've had to hold back on that because we were making this change. We wanted to observe, get some feedback on our calendar that we have this year. Last year, I get my years mixed up. And then feedback from other districts that already have done similar to what we are talking about here. How do you foresee that? I'm sort of expect we're going to have another year of that.
Well, I think that we would like to move back to the 2-year calendars. I think at this point, from what we have gone through over the past 2 years and researching these calendars and see what the other districts are doing and see how it's ongoing, I believe that this is going to become the model that we're going to move forward with. I've actually already drafted a 26-27 look just to get an idea for where the days are at. So we'd like to move back to that. And if that's something that, we'll discuss at the administration level, whether or not we want to bring this back to you, sometime early part of next year for the following year, like we have traditionally done in the past.
I was gonna say, yeah.
I think that would be very appreciated both by the staff and our community. The 2-year calendar was very, very popular.
I think that would be a great idea, or at this point, a good compromise. Let's not try to do the following year right now, but
Yes.
after we've gone through it a little while, we could do it earlier in the year. And I think evolving to a 2-year is great, but we have also found, like with anything, the further out you try to predict, there are often what seem to be
Uncertainties.
minor tweaks
Yes.
for us, but they cause significant disruption when someone, even though it said tentative all over it, has booked a flight or got grandma coming for a graduation plan that now has to be changed. So that's the trade-off with going too far out in the future, I think.
And that's I would never want to go more than 2. And even when we do our 2 years, I've always, that one right there has my little disclaimer on it. Every date on here is subject to change depending on the situation. So we do have to remain fluid as we ended up in this calendar. I mean, if you'd asked me 3 years ago, would this be where we would be looking at calendars, I would have said not a chance, but we are now. So, we have to remain open to everything.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Good to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on all the things that, I'm going to just echo something Dr. Frattarelli said. We did get a number of emails. It was nice to get a number of emails that were positive and that were saying we like this instead of only hearing from those who don't like something. That was nice. And
Refreshing.
there were a few of the trends that you talked about, the international travel, the childcare, and just the difficulties of, a random week here and there. But I think to the extent that we can help the community rally around solutions for that, the better.
Can I echo, usually people only email when they're upset,
Right.
so this must be a real popular idea to get 30.
So with that in mind, we have a motion and a second to approve the 25-26 calendar as presented. Is there any further discussion?
No, ma'am.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, I'm sure it's already out on social media. The calendar
If
has
not,
been
it will be
approved.
posted tomorrow. Thank you.
Stop it, you three.
All right, I almost skipped that, but very important that we have that dialogue and get that approved and let people start making those plans.
That's right.
And with that said, we are in need of an executive session to discuss legal issues, contractual issues, and personnel recommendations. So I thank everybody for joining in person or online, and we are now going into
Motion to go
executive
into
session.
executive session.
Thank you.